So today we're going to talk about the budgeting circus around the education sector in Kenya. And with us, we have Alphonse Shundu, who is the Kenya editor at Africa Check. So we'll be talking about billions, millions. I don't know. You see, this number is a bit confusing. So Alphonse will be the one to help us wade into this a bit of soup, trying to figure out this number that seems very elusive when it comes to the education sector budget.
Thank you, Tess, for having me. And it's just that the question here is how hard can it be to keep track of one number?
Yeah, so set the scene for us. So we have the president, William Ruto. He's speaking in Garissa, northeastern Kenya, and he's talking about more funding to the universities. So what exactly does he say when he's addressing the people in Garissa?
So it's a graduation at the Garissa University. The president is there and he is speaking about many things. But what jumps out to us as fact checkers is the bit where he says he has allocated an extra 4 billion shillings for more funding to universities, and he makes reference to a meeting he had with vice chancellors where that was agreed, and so that's the background where he says.
So we see this 4 billion becomes it grows fatter.
It does get an upgrade because the video that was posted by the Presidential Strategic Communications Unit. That video, in the video, the president is saying 4 billion.
We have provided an extra 4 billion shillings to make sure that all our students are catered for.
But in the caption of the video that was posted on the official State House YouTube page, the caption says 400 billion.
Wow.
Yes. So you're looking and 400 billion is 100 times the 4 billion the president
from 4 billion
makes.
to 400 billion. So,
yes.
And you say this is in the caption. So would you say this was like an honest mistake or was it intentional? Like, what's your take on this?
I wouldn't ascribe this to deliberate misinformation, or it could be part laziness, it could be part mischief, it could be part because the video with the exact wording of the president is right there.
Right.
So if they had listened to it, they would have seen that it was. He said 4. He did not say 400. And if they were present and listening, they would have noticed that what the president said was that the whole education budget for Kenya was in the region of 600 billion. So when you say 400 billion goes to 70 public universities, that's really off because it's 2/3. And yet the bulk of the funding for education, we know, goes towards the Teacher Service Commission, the payment of salaries for teachers, employment of teachers, and terms and conditions for teachers. Then there are the secondary schools, there are primary schools capitation. So it would be impossible for you to say 400 billion towards universities. So here we can just say probably it's just laziness. They didn't listen to the video or it was mischief. But I wouldn't want the fact checker to ascribe ill motive and say they were deceiving.
After Garissa, we see 9 days later, Ruto comes up with another figure. Now we have 40 billion.
I have enhanced their budget by 40 billion shillings. The universities.
So we have 4 billion, then we have 40 billion, then 400 billion.
This is something that we struggle with as fact checkers because he say this is a number about a specific thing in the budget.
Right.
So he's referring to the same thing, university funding, additional funding to universities. That is what he's referring to. In all his pronouncements, he's referring to a meeting with vice chancellors.
Right.
He's very specific about this financial year, which at the time when he was speaking on June 30th for this second time, it would be the 2023-2024 financial year. Now, in that meeting at that time, he says and I think it was during the editors' meeting, that disastrous interview he had about. Where he was updating the country about the Gen Z youth-led protests in Kenya. And he says that he's allocated an additional 40 billion to universities. Now, if somebody was traveling with him or somebody was watching news every day, they would see the 4, they would see the 400, then they would see the 40, and then they would be confused.
But now, Africa Check, how would you now make sense of the numbers? Like, what is the actual allocation, that additional allocation that was made to education sector?
We started with the source documents.
Right.
So where do we go when it comes to fact-checking claims like that? And the first place, because he's talking about an additional allocation, the question we ask ourselves, what year is he talking about? How are additional allocations made to universities, and where can we find that information? So it's a budget.
Right.
The budget, if it's an additional allocation, it will be in the supplementary budget.
Yeah.
The supplementary budget would come from the National Treasury, and then it would end up with the, what is it called, in Parliament, and then it will later be reported on by the Control of Budget. So all these are official government documents or official places where you can get credible and reliable documents about budgeting. And when we checked the supplementary budget, we found that the actual figure of additional allocations was 4.9 billion.
Why would you say that there is such an inflation for these figures? Like, why would this be happening so consistently when we are getting communication from his team and himself?
When it comes to public finance communication, and a lot of this happens a lot, and PR practitioners sometimes mislead their principals by telling them that the higher the figure, it's a signal about the priority or the commitment of the institution or the government on that specific thing. So the more money, the argument goes, means you're putting more focus on that. And that's why there is this tendency to say, oh, I've given X amount of money for this project. And here you see the exaggeration from 40 to 400 to from 4 to 40 to 400. And it's just thing. And the question you would ask is, does it matter?
Yeah, I'm wondering, does it matter 440, 400? It's just a figure. He's just going to say, well, there's an allocation to education. And
it really does matter, because this we're talking about public finance spending in a country where we are struggling with public debt. The bulk of the revenues goes towards paying debt. At the last count, it was about 6 to 7 shillings of the revenues collected going towards debt service. So every shilling matters. And if you're going to say 4 billion or inflate 40 to 400, then you're just messing up the decision making. Remember, the politicians rarely do have time to understand the figures, especially in the budget. Now, if this is put out by the Strategic Communications Unit, and it's picked up by journalists, by other content creators, by bloggers, about the kind of investment that has been put in education. And they are using these faulty figures as evidence. It's likely to mess the budgeting towards education, because people might think we already give them too much money, there's no reason for adding more money. Or B, people might think if we're putting more emphasis, let's focus all our attention on education, because that's where all the money goes. And so it really matters when you're reporting on public finance to be very, very accurate.
But that's not the only claim around education spending that has been made in the public. There's another one. Could you tell us about that one specifically?
We actually don't doubt that the government is investing more in education. It's the communication around that investment that we have a problem with. And that communication is erratic, it's chaotic, and it's not backed by figures. And I think this other example that you have, it's where they speak about the percentage of the budget that's allocated to education. So, and we have instances. So we have this AI tool within Africa Check that we use, and that tool picks out instances where a claim is repeated.
Yes.
So we saw an instance where the education minister says 30% of the national budget goes towards education. That's the education minister. Then we see another claim where a former union leader makes the claim that it's 28% of the budget goes towards education.
Right.
Then we see another claim where it's another person, I don't know, it's a former minister who's a politician still, who makes the same claim about the education funding. And the president repeats. So the claim morphs, it's either 28%, 30%, 1/3 of the budget goes to...
Which is, when you think about a difference of 2% could be billions.
Yeah, it's
Kenya
2 percentage
shillings.
points, and that's huge.
Yes.
Yeah,
So what is the official data around the percentage of the budget?
And this is where we just go, and we will just go to the report of the control of budget. And it's very easy. You go to the report of the control of budget has a website.
Right.
On the website, every quarter he publishes the budgets of every government department and every county, and how much has been allocated, how much has been spent, and how much has been disbursed from the national treasury to the counties. So when we checked it, we found it is fair, about 15.6%, about 16% of the total national budget goes towards education. In real terms, that is 16% of about 4.43 trillion, which is 689 billion or something like that. Yeah.
And that is, so we have been seeing 28, 30, and 15.6 is half of that.
Yes.
So maybe you can break down to us what this math means. Like, conceptually, there is an error that has been communicated online by the government officials. So what does it mean in numbers? Take us through that math, please.
This is where misinformation becomes disinformation. And it's just about understanding what you're talking about. When we speak about the national budget, it's everything. It's the allocations to the executive, which is the president, his ministers, the ministries, the state corporations, and all that. We talk about the parliament, the Senate and the National Assembly, and the organs within that. And we also talk about the judiciary, which is our courts, the judges and stuff like that. The salaries to state officers in the consolidated fund. We talk about the money given to counties, the money that goes towards debt service, the subscriptions to international organizations. It's a whole...
Everything, basically.
Everything. Now,
Kenya's
when you talk
budget.
Kenya's budget, that is what we plan to spend on this. Yeah, and that is just... that is what. Now, the calculation problem, and if you look at the most recent numbers for 2023, it's about 4.43 trillion. That's the final figure that the control of budget gave in the most recent report that just came out like 2-3 months ago. So that is the budget. Now, we know from the control of budget what the allocation to education is. And that allocation is, let me just confirm the figures, is 689.4 billion.
Yes. And I would imagine if we're doing 30% of that, that would be a completely different figure.
Yeah, if you take 4.43 and you say 30% of that, it would give you about 1.4 something trillion. But if you take the 689 and you divide by the 4.43, it brings you to 15.6%.
So why would you say they keep saying this 30%, 30%, 30%, 30%? Why does this number keep coming up?
I think it's a conversation that the executive has internally. about what ministry is taking the bulk of the budget, or what sector, if I would put it that way, what sector is taking the biggest portion of the budget. And then they look at the education sector, and they look at the total budget to the executive.
Yes.
Not the total budget of the nation. It's the total budget of the executive.
Right.
And here it was about 2.44 trillion. So if you do 689 divide by 2.44 trillion, you're getting the 28%, close to 30%, or the 1/3 that they keep speaking about.
So I guess they rounded off to 30 because it sounds nice, yeah?
It's a nice round number.
But when you look at the math, that is billions that are being calculated there. The perception is not the same. And of course, the media is also picking up that figure. So if someone is doing the math, they'll be like, we're showing like very huge variances when it comes to the budget. But then why would that matter even? Rounding off, rounding, down.
I think it's the optics, and as I mentioned, there's this bit where when you're talking about the numbers, you want to show where your priorities are, where you're putting more commitment, and then it comes to what portion of the pie, which is the national cake, goes towards education. And for them, that is something they want to show, because remember, education has all the teachers.
True.
It has the bulk of the country's population. So bulk of the country's population are either in a learning institution, primary, secondary, or a university.
Yeah.
So those are the things that they want to put out to us.
Yeah. And I guess also when you look at Kenya, the education sector is a huge point of conversation. We are in a country where teachers are usually on strike.
The lecturers are on strike right now.
You see, lecturers are on strike, and we are hearing they have reduced the budget for higher education. Now HELB will not be able to provide students from, humble backgrounds the financing they need.
Yeah, the new university funding model.
Gen Z are also on top of this story, and they're like, they want to see more action, more money for, safeguarding the future. And when you look at education, when you look at young people, you want to think about using education to further the potential prospects for, a generation of young people to see what their future is. So I guess it's a huge priority when you're thinking about it like that, right?
Yeah, and we think of it. Let's just think of it as you would. So the analogy that I see around is think of the whole budget as a pie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you have all these slices. So there's a slice for education, there's a slice for security, there's a slice for healthcare, there's a slice for the counties, there's a slice for debt repayment. Like, there are all these slices. Now, when education is taking 15.6%, you would see, if you put all the numbers together, you'll see that debt repayment is taking about 1.9 trillion. That is about 30 something to 40% of the budget goes towards paying the debt. So that is the thing that they should not be overlooking. If you focus and you keep saying that 30% of the budget goes towards education, you are misrepresenting a picture, and you would think you have more money when you actually don't, because when it comes to paying debt, that is a fast charge on the consolidated fund. What that means is we have to pay our debt fast
before you think of anything else.
Before we think about spending on anything else.
So say I'm online, right? I am an ex-user, right? My work is to scroll. How do I just cut through all of this?
You see, budget numbers for quite some time have not been very interesting to look at. And for the time that Africa Check has been around, we've seen an evolution. And if the protests are anything to go by, you could see that people are actually reading the documents and questioning the numbers. So our job is really simple. It's to point people to where they can get proof about this allocation. And they can go to the website of the National Treasury and then they can scroll and go to the area where there are budgets, and they can find line by line item of what was allocated and how much was spent. There's quite a ton of what. So there is the budget documents, there is the budget review and outlook paper, which shows how much was spent. Then there is the quarterly economic and budget review. So all these documents in the National Treasury. But you don't just take the word Treasury's word for it. You can also check with the control of the budget of budget, because she's the one who approves by law all expenditure. So, and the quarterly reports, every quarter she says, this is the much you had budgeted for. If there were any revisions, these are the revisions. Then tells this is the much we disbursed and this is what you have spent. So that tracking really helps, and it's all public and people can do that. And what we are trying to do is expose people so that we have an informed citizenry.
That sounds fantastic. So I guess when a figure is too big to be true, it's probably a bit.
It's probably it's when it's too big and it's quite impressive. You just have to check it out. And for us, from where we sit as fact checkers, what we know we cannot be telling people to go and do the homework, because like looking through those volumes can be enervating. So what we try to tell people is, yes, do your homework, but if you don't have the time, if you don't have the skills, if math is not your strong point, just come to Africa Check. Shoot us a question either on our WhatsApp tip line, get us on Twitter. We will break down whatever numbers you want, and we will show you where you can get those numbers, and then you'll be fine. But the bottom line is, these are public funds, these are your taxes, so you have to understand how they are spent, where they are spent, and when somebody says they have allocated X amount of money towards this, the signal to you is that that is where the commitment is. Follow through. Go and find out, does it mean more teachers? Does it mean better classrooms? Does it mean bigger libraries or well-equipped libraries or laboratories? Does it mean... There are all these things that you can follow through so that it makes sense. When they say they have allocated X number of billions towards hospitals or health, find out where the money is going, because that is the building block towards holding public figures accountable.